in front of us. It is really, I know, look at all those people and we can see them, which is very exciting. It is one, this is a really exciting thing because I think this is the fullest we've had Avid Reader since 2019. This is the biggest crowd since 2019. Very, very exciting. And still people are coming through, so that's really great. There is a couple of seats, I think, in the very front row. So if you wanted to kind of go down there, come on down, we haven't started yet. Or there's seats back there as well. Excellent. It's my great pleasure to be hosting tonight, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on here, which is the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to any other elders who are here tonight. And I'd also like to acknowledge that because of Zoom, we are zooming out onto Aboriginal lands all around Australia. And I would like to acknowledge all of the elders, the lands that we're zooming out to, which will be many, because this is Aboriginal land, always was, always will be, and sovereignty was never ceded. So on that note, we will launch the proceedings tonight. It's very, very exciting to have this, our biggest launch in a year and a half. And it's really great to have this many people in real life and this many people on our Zoom as well. And I'd like to just a couple of things for the people on Zoom. Emma Kate is your host on Zoom, and she will be putting the link to purchase the book in your chat function. So that will come up as the link comes up. For people in the room here tonight, the book is front and center at the counter. We're in the very happy position of this book has been run out of print twice already before its launch. So we're currently in possession of some of the last copies that are around at the moment until Wednesday, when the new print run will make it up here. So the copies that are at the counter are all we'll be able to get until Wednesday this week. But if we do run out tonight, because I know that you're all wanting to get your hands on the copy, if we do run out tonight, we will be getting Sandra back in to sign, so we can do some personalised signatures as well. So if you are on Zoom and you'd like a personalised signature, just call the shop on 3846 3422, 07 3846 3422, and pay for your book online, and we can get it signed for you. Hopefully tonight, if not on Wednesday, and then we can send it out to you. So that's all good. Now, I think that might be almost the end of my preamble. One other thing I'd like to say is that if you're on Zoom or in the audience, if you're a social media user, please feel free to social media away, because that's another great way of letting people know that a book is out in the world. You may not be friends with Facebook at the moment, but you can certainly Instagram or Twitter and tweet out the celebration for tonight. And we are at Avid Reader 4101 on Twitter if you're at home following along. So I'm going to get out of the way now. It's my great pleasure to introduce Sandra Hogan, who is a journalist, writer, reviewer, and business writing teacher. And of course, she is here with her wonderful new, fresh off the press, newly minted book that is rare as hen's teeth. And alongside Sandra, we have Sue-Ellen Kusher, who has a lifelong curiosity about people and their behaviours, and we wonder where they came from. And in conversation with him today is, of course, the inimitable Kristina Olsson, who is a multi-award-winning author. And her latest books, Boy Lost, the memoir, and Shell are at the counter as well today, so you can have a look at those today. And of course, she's running the sold out again and again memoir workshop series here at Avid Reader, so we're very excited about that too. So everybody, welcome our guests tonight, and I'll hand over to Chris Olsson.
Is my mic working? Can you hear me?
Oh, you might need to.
How was that?
Yes,
That's my special voice. Hello everyone. I'm Chris. I too would like to acknowledge, as Chrissy has already, the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on now, as well as the traditional owners of all the places from which people have travelled tonight to be here at this very special event. Aboriginal people, of course, have always cared and nurtured these places for millennia, and their sovereignty has never been ceded. As Chrissy said as well, it's always still my best line. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So here we are on that Aboriginal land to talk about a very special book. And welcome to all of you to this launch of this special book with my little eye by Sandra Hogan. I have to say from the outset that I don't come to this book as an objective journalist or the objective journalist I was once when Sandra and I first met. That was back in the day, and this is going to date both of us, when certain unnamed newspapers were still half decent newspapers of record, family newspapers in fact, and one could work on them and still hold one's head up in polite company. Not anymore. Instead, I do come to this book as Sandra's friend, someone who's been around it from its earliest days as a manuscript when it looked very different to this. We've talked about it in all kinds of places, mostly on walking tracks all over southeast Queensland. And it's taken its time to, find its feet. But I reckon that's what happens with the best books. They take their time to become what they're meant to be. And this one certainly has. It's arrived. This one has taken a decade, Sandra Hogan, to come to the.
We were just Sue-Ellen and I were just talking about that. She called me as a sort of acquaintance with common friends. You know, in 2009. Our friends are not common.
Thank you.
It was 2009, and I just looked it up today. The end on the manuscript in 2019, so it's a lot of time.
Been praying.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I want to spend some time tonight actually talking not just about the story itself, which you probably all know already is extraordinary, hilarious, and also heartbreaking, I think. But I also want to talk about the process of getting this book going and getting it finished and the effects of that process on both of you. And I know, that you're all probably here to either hear the hilarious stories, unless you've already heard them already on radio or television or in newspapers, because it's been just about everywhere already. You'd have to have been out of the country, which is illegal at the moment, or in a coma to not have heard some of the stories already in the media about these 3 children playing spies, or in a nest of spies, if you like, in a suburban backyard in Brisbane. But we'll get to those shortly. Sandra Hogan, the fabulous Sandra Hogan, can you take us back there? I'd like you to take us back there to the very beginning, when you first heard Sue-Ellen's fabulous stories, way back, 10 or 12 years ago by then, and why it took 10 years for the book to take its shape. I mean, I know there was ASIO in the mix.
ASIO, that slows things down.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was, so I got this phone call, and it was someone who I kind of liked but didn't know very well. We wouldn't normally have coffee. She invited me out for coffee, and I thought, well, okay. And then when I got there, she just told me this wild story, like about being a child spy, and I'm going, sure. And I didn't believe it, because first of all, it won't take you long to see what kind of person Sue-Ellen is. She's a raging extrovert. She just doesn't seem like the kind of person who might be a spy to me. Don't make assumptions, okay? And
therefore the perfect spy.
Yeah, it's the perfect disguise. Yeah, and but also, secondly, I just thought, well, would she really be telling a journalist about this? If she was a spy, it doesn't seem, it just seemed unlikely. So I didn't believe her, but when she started telling me these stories, I thought I didn't care. I just wanted to hear more of the stories, and it actually didn't take very long before I did believe it, long before we had any proof, we could prove it, because I believed her because, and if you have read the book, perhaps you'll know what I mean. It's that the stories have that ring of authenticity. They're not like reading James Bond or, like Le Carre. These are stories that they have a very local feel, and they're just really unusual and interesting. So I wanted to write the book, and I wouldn't let her go. But my problem was that unless we could confirm it in some way, it didn't matter whether I believed her or not, we would never, ever going to be able to write that story, because, ASIO is in the business of,
Secrets, Sandra.
secrets, yes. And, they're not going to be telling you all this stuff. So we can talk about how we got that permission in the end.
But ASIO wouldn't talk. They wouldn't play games.
There was no way ASIO. I did actually write a letter to ASIO, but I didn't really expect them to answer it. And of course,
Can you imagine, dear ASIO, please tell me all your secrets about everything that happened in Brisbane in 1960.
Yeah.
So they said no.
No reply. They just wouldn't, bother. Then I expect they set up a file, but that was it. And then
That's Sandra Hogan.
Yeah. But so it wasn't until 2011. That was so two years later, nearly, with that. So I might let Sue-Ellen tell what happened at that point. Yeah, the April 2011.
So like Sandra, I was completely and utterly naive, because I rang ASIO and said, could I get my father's file under the Freedom of Information, please? And I later found out that gave them a great giggle. I had many morning teas on that one. And of course, we didn't get anything, but because I had rung them, they had my current details, and they contacted me when Julia Gillard decided to be the second country in the world to actually write the official history of espionage in Australia. And when they decided to do that, they asked me if I thought my mother would remember anything. Now, my mother is like a dictionary that you turn the key and the river of information just siphons out of her brain through her mouth. She's amazing. So once they decided to do the official history and Mum semi-agreed to talk to them, the story continues from there.
But let's go back maybe one or two steps, in that your father, Dudley, who to my mind in the beginning was the main person, he died.
Yeah.
And your mother, when Sandra approached her at first, wouldn't talk.
No.
She didn't want to, and Sandra says she requested several times and she said no, but then she finally gave in, and Sandra interviewed her 11 times or something.
But she only gave in. It was very interesting when ASIO finally turned up with the researcher from ANU University, and they turned up with two ex-directors general of ASIO. Like, this is the head of ASIO, and two of them, for authenticity, to assure my mother that they were serious about what they were doing. They also had a letter from Julia Gillard to my mother, and they also had a release from the Commonwealth Secrets Act, which we were all living under. And even with all of that, it took 20 minutes for Mum to actually be able to get a sound to come out of her mouth, because when you have a secret and you keep that secret, just because someone gives you permission to tell it doesn't mean it happens. She had great trouble actually getting the language out.
Secrets are very, very powerful. I think most families would understand that.
Yeah, it's like most families do understand about secrets, but this is like sort of heightened. It's what makes it an exciting story. I think it's like ultimate family secret. Yeah,
absolutely.
But so that was it, April 2011. So ASIO actually went to interview Joan, and Sue-Ellen was there. ASIO declined my requests for a transcript of that interview, but what it meant was that I had my official confirmation, And it really had happened, and they were free if they chose to speak about it. So that was when I began this series of interviews. And to answer your original question about why it took so long, I mean, it was partly that is waiting for the official permission, and then also waiting then for their book to come out, Spy Catchers, the ASIO history, which gave me this, for the first time, gave us all, actually solid facts about, ASIO, the internal workings of and the cases and the world that Dudley, Sue-Ellen's father, worked in, and Joan. So there was a kind of a waiting factor. But the other part of it is just to remember with this book, like most books, if you read a non-fiction book, the research that you are getting is book-based, like it's a really, and I did a fair amount of reading, I guess, to get atmosphere and to get ASIO background and so on. But essentially the research for this book is about people's memories. And so, and you can imagine how difficult that is, especially for a group of people, a family, that have made it their business to forget, like it was because they weren't allowed to speak about it all their lives. And so what took the time, and, I don't resent even a minute of it, was waiting for these memories to gradually come back, and for this family to sort them out together and to talk them through together, and for things for them to be able to find their family story.
I think that's an incredibly interesting part of the story, that memory needed time to coalesce in people's brains and hearts, I suppose. Even though they were layered in there, it took all this time for them to, I don't know, and for people's bodies to give them permission to speak.
That is a really good way of saying it, because we all know that memory is spatially located. So we kind of had to locate it in our brain. And each one of us had a way of locking the secrets away. And you must understand, our view of a secret is very different from a normal view of a secret. A secret is something you never, ever, ever tell anyone. So I have had great giggles during my life when someone says to me, "Say, Sue-Ellen, can you keep a secret?" Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah. So it was finding the memory, and then it was unlocking the memory, but mostly it was giving ourselves permission to access the memory,
which is enormous. Now I want to come back to that, because it did have lots of, yes, roll-on effects. All of that stuff did. But I guess for anyone here who's been under a log in the past little while, I think we should just go back to the very beginning and talk, and just, can you tell people about your dad, his physical attributes, as well as your mum, and how it came to happen that you became a family of 5 spies?
My dad, well, first of all, I thought the book was going to be about my dad. I had no idea until ASIO came knocking that my mother had the top secret job, not my father. So that was something, I've learned so much along the way. So that was something I didn't know. But from the very beginning, I think my father had massive amounts of charm. And I think that's because those survivors in those days learned a very different set of skills to the academic skills that we learn these days. And they learned skills of survival. He was very charming. He was, he had a socialist heart. He had a heart that was about helping other people, which was one of the things I found very contrary about the fact that he worked for ASIO, and at that time the political environment was quite contrary to the experience that we had at the time of our parents, who were constantly looking after other people. We had a smorgasbord of people, ethnicities, cultures in our home. As a matter of fact, it was very odd to have someone who didn't come from a really, really diverse cultural background that we even associated with. Dad was he was a big man. He was an amputee, which a lot of people argued with me after he died, and my mother. They just didn't believe that he only had one leg, but because he walked so well on it. he and other ASIO officers that I have met have an amazing skill to look at you and everything else just disappears. I'm having a conversation with you, and there is something incredibly secure about someone who can turn that gaze on you and make you feel safe and make you feel comfortable. And that was the skill that he had.
That's a very good spy skill. I imagine that was developed over the years. But the wooden leg, the fact that he used it so well, and I guess he had to, because he'd stand out like James Bond if he was the spy with the limb.
Yeah.
Everyone, it would be a no-brainer, wouldn't it? So he had to walk like everyone else. Yeah.
Plus, he didn't believe that anything was impossible. So, we were very definitely brought up with possibility thinking, and he did not ever see the fact that he only had one leg as an impairment of any kind. He skied, he water skied, he swam, he did everything with great difficulty, but he did. He literally did not believe that you should ever make an excuse for yourself.
Yeah. So I reckon, even if you've read the book, I think people would love you to just talk about what it was like on a day-to-day, on any given day, what it was like living in that family.
Well, it was normal to us. So that was normal life, but we definitely lived a double life in that there were times when the switch was on, and what that meant was that we needed to behave, we needed to become quiet and not be observed. We needed to become extremely conscious of what was going on around us. We needed to remember things, to notice things, remember things. And on the way home, and guys, I did not know this at the time. I only know this retrospectively. But then there would be a debrief in the car on the way home where Mum and Dad would ask us a series of questions about, who was at the back door? Did you notice anything out of place? What was so-and-so? What funny story did so-and-so tell someone else? So they debriefed us in a very, very normal way. But we knew that if we were with Dad and Mum and we were out, and there was this certain indicator from them, and I can't really explain what that was, except that we all knew that Mum and Dad would give this very unobtrusive message to us that it was time.
What about the different colour t-shirts in the back of the?
Oh, that was nothing. Dad would go on. Dad would say, "Okay, we're going on a car run," and we would all have a bag of clothes packed. We'd grab the bag of clothes, jump in the car, and the car would do an observation loop. And so the three of us would be in the car, or the two of us would be in the car, and one would pop up, and then the other one would hide, and then we'd go around the block, and then the two of us would pop up in different clothes, and then both of us would hide, and then one would get in the front seat. And so there were all these combinations and variations of positions in the car. But if we were popped up, we were watching, noticing, observing, remembering, and then we would download to Dad when he stopped the car.
What about the Labor Day marches?
The Labor Day marches were big, So we would go to every march, every single march that there was. We knew that if we went to a march, Dad would be taking lots of photos. So that meant no complaints about where you were positioned. You would be asked to sit in a certain position, and then he might move us, and we might pack up and move a couple of 100 yards. And he would always be taking photos of us, except we were never in the photos. It would be photos of the background, or critical people, or groups, or who knows? I mean, I never saw those photos, so I don't know, but I do know that they were never of us.
So anyone who has heard any of the interviews or read any of the stories will be just waiting for me to ask this question. Tell us about the Petrovs.
Oh, the Petrovs. Okay. So we just moved into our new house at Barden, and Dad came home and said, "We're going on a holiday." Very unusual. We never went on holidays because my parents worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we were very excited. Mum packed up, we got in the car, and then they said, "Oh, there's another family coming with us. We have to pretend that they're our grandparents, so we'll have to make up names for them. So that's how Pee-wee got her name, because they said they had to be Australian names. So they called him Jack and her Pee-wee. And I never called him anything because it gave me the creeps. Even as a little kid, I was a very little kid. He really gave off a very ingenuous vibe. She was fantastic. We went on pseudo holiday, and every couple of days the press or the KGB would catch up with us, and we'd have to pack up and go to the next location. So there was always a location that had been scouted out for us to go to. And my father was driving in a way that was not normal. So I'd say to my mum, why is Dad driving like that? And she would always say to us, oh, we're having an adventure. I'm like, oh, okay. And so, we believed everything Mum said because it was Mum. So, okay, this was an adventure. So we were never stressed because we knew life was crazy, and we knew that
It's just confirmed.
yeah, anything could happen.
So when you say he wasn't driving like he normally was, you mean he was driving very fast?
Yeah, like a racing car driver, I think I said. Yeah,
him.
yeah. And we were being chased. I have no idea whether it was KGB, the media, or both of them, but we were often being chased. So we'd be chased from one location to the next location, and they'd eventually catch up with us again, and then we'd move again. But in the meantime, I had a wonderful time with Pee-wee. She painted my toenails red. I was 3. She painted my in 19
Still red.
in 50s. Yeah, I know. I was so excited. So she did really outrageous things like that with with a little kid. You remember those kind of things?
Yeah, no, totally. I'm going to flick to Sandra now because I think I've asked her to do a very short reading, and I think she's chosen something around that time.
We're doing the Petrovs, yeah. So
okay, this is a co-reading.
No, I'm just holding.
Oh, okay.
I'm the holder.
You could take roles, like roles. You could play it.
So this is Brisbane, 1956. Joan, that's Sue-Ellen's mum. Joan was on her knees beside the tub, bathing Sue-Ellen and Mark when she met Russian defector Evdokia Petrov. Dudley ushered Mrs. Petrov into the room, and while the children squealed and splashed, the two women made stilted conversation. Mrs. Petrov had come to look Joan over and decide whether she and her husband Vladimir would come to live with the Doherty family for 2 months. It was November 1956, and the Olympic Games were about to be held in Melbourne. There was enormous excitement in Sport Mad Australia. It was the first time an Olympic Games had been held in the Southern Hemisphere, or even outside Europe and North America, and the Duke of Edinburgh was going to open the Games. Television broadcasting was starting up for the first time to record the event. And then I'm just going to skip over here a bit. At first, they weren't the first family that they tried out. At first, the Petrovs were sent to stay with the family of ASIO agent Leo Carter outside Sydney. But Evdokia was not happy there. She told Joan afterwards that Mrs. Carter did not wash vegetables before she peeled them, and Evdokia did not think that was hygienic. She expected both the washing and the peeling of vegetables, and she wanted to stay somewhere else. So ASIO's personnel manager, who Joan remembers was called Mac, asked Dudley whether he and Joan would be prepared to look after the Petrovs. And he suggested that a young family in Queensland would be good cover for the Russian defectors. They would look like a family group with grandparents. And Dudley agreed. The next step was for Evdokia to inspect the Doherty household and decide whether it was acceptable to her. The meeting of the two women, the Russian spy and the Australian spy, in a cramped Brisbane bathroom was not a great social success. Evdokia told ASIO she thought Joan was rather a dull, housewifely sort of woman, but she thought she'd probably run out of choices in the strange and primitive country she'd found herself in. She agreed to go and live with the Dohertys.
And there's much more where that came from, of course. I'm conscious of the time because both Sandra and Sue-Ellen have asked that we leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm just warning you about that and hope that you're all cogitating on the story. But I really do also want to talk about the flip side, because there was a darker side to the story. It wasn't just a very amusing suburban tale of a nest of spies in the Gap, or an amazing adventures and terribly interesting lives. I guess for me, the story, apart from being revelatory, of course, and funny and very important, is also a very sad story. And mainly for the children. I think the 3 children whose childhoods were basically appropriated by the state and really by the parents in a way. Because, Sue-Ellen, after your dad died, life as you all knew it just stopped, didn't it? It just stopped.
That was the hardest bit of all, was we didn't just lose a father, we lost a life, we lost a network, we lost income. Just everything stopped because everyone that we knew was part of the job. They were all connected to my father's job. And we had secrets and we weren't allowed to talk to anyone. We couldn't explain anything to anyone and everything disappeared. It just evaporated, and the whole family was in shock for 6 months because we had played this role for so long. We didn't know who we were. We didn't know how to behave. We didn't know what was okay, what wasn't okay, because our rudder had gone. And so it was a very confounding time, and it was a very lonely time for all of us.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard to even apprehend how children especially would then recreate their lives without knowing what their other life was, really, without totally understanding.
But we did lead a double life. So we still had, I think it was easier somehow for maybe my brother and I, because we still had a life as a child and as a high school student, or I was working by that stage. We still had this role of the normal family that we were playing. It's just that the real life had evaporated and all the people around us had evaporated.
And ASIO had completely left you cold,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. We were called, or we weren't.
Oh, that's applause for the story.
Oh, thank you so much.
Everyone.
My mother was called to Sydney. They asked her if she would go to the office in Sydney for a debriefing. I was not present at that. I have no idea what happened at that debriefing. But the day after my father had died, 2 agents turned up at the house to remind us that we were still covered by the Commonwealth Secrets Act, and that was for life. So really put the fear of God into us at the same time. Not that we weren't stressed enough.
So were you allowed to talk about your father?
No. Yes, the father that everyone else knew, but not the real father. No.
So how did you know what was real and what wasn't?
Oh, I don't know. It was a very confusing time. Really, that 6 months, it's a blur. It really is. It's like a gap. I know we survived. I know my brother looked after all of the finances and the will. I know we ate, but I don't know anything else. It really is. It's quite a hiatus in my memory, and I've got an excellent memory, but that's it's like a blank slate.
Like a surgical excision.
Yeah,
That it was gone forever.
Yeah.
And you could not revisit it.
No, and I guess we were trying to figure out what we do now. Who are we now? How do we operate now?
Yeah, extraordinary. I'm really interested in the ongoing effects of that kind of imposed silence. I mean, it was a different kind of silence to the one you had to work with when your father was alive, and when ASIO was still part of your life. But ASIO completely absented themselves. It was as if they never existed, and so this silence descends. Have you thought about this and what the kick-on effects have been?
Fake it till you make it.
Right.
I think that's what we all did.
Yeah.
I think we just were so good at pretending to look okay that we just went on pretending to look okay.
To look normal. Like
as normal as we knew how to be. And and made it up as we went along. Sadly, that was a pattern that, you know, needed to be broken at some stage, but that was the pattern, I think, that we all adopted.
Yeah.
Would you agree? You've talked to Sandra knows more about my life than I do. I mean, really, you should be answering this.
But I think sorry, Sandra, were you going to say something else?
I was going to say that I think that silence, it is kind of a shocking thing that was what I was watching over these years of talking to them, that people who had been forced to take the memory, all the memories of their childhood, they were working all the time. You know, their parents were working, they were working all the time. So that none of that could be spoken about. So they had to lock it away. They talk about locking it in boxes in their mind. You know, like, so there's this really, they had to just forget about that and then work out how other people lived and follow that. But what I came to, the thing that I kind of grieved for all of them for, was that in doing that, they lost this. I started to realize how important it is for people to have a story about their lives, you know, to know who you are, to know what your childhood is, to be able to talk about even, you know, like just the very simple things about who you were and where you came from, what your life was, you know, like that makes you, and I spoke a couple of times to psychologists, you know, like while I was talking, and I'm not one, so I'm not going to, you know, try and pretend that I can give you a psychological view, but what they were all saying was, yeah, we need this kind of, to be integrated humans, we need to have our story, and it came very strongly for me.
And if I can just say, we did not know our story. We only knew our bit of our story. So my mother knew her bit, I knew my bit, my brother knew his bit, and so on. And so we did not have a story that wove through the years. We had this really staccato bits and pieces. And it wasn't until Sandra wrote the book and we read the book that we knew our story. I know that sounds nuts, but I did not know what happened in my life until I read that book.
And it started to happen when Sandra began to interview you all together.
The therapy sessions.
That's exactly, the therapy sessions.
Well, they were, because that was the first time we'd ever opened that box.
And what was that like?
Exhausting. Absolute. It's so emotional, so exhausting, so relieving, such a sense of freedom, just total admiration for my family. It was a massive relief. It was 4.5 hours of life. It was the most living I think I've ever done in 4.5 hours.
Did you find you were, you know, revealing things to each other that you didn't know before?
Oh, I didn't know what happened the night my father died until that first session. I had no idea. Because you don't know, because you don't talk about it, you don't know what impact it has on your siblings. So I didn't know how the rest of my family had coped, because you don't talk about it.
You're not allowed to.
Not allowed to. So it was massive, and I definitely go back there and visit it a lot.
Do you?
Yeah.
Because if you talk about it, I think about it being dreamlike, that the stories were dreamlike. You didn't know whether you dreamed them or whether you lived them.
And that was the loveliest part, because the three siblings had their memories trained, and our memories were trained so well. The consistency of the facts was, I've got to think of the right word, reaffirming. It felt safe. That was really enormously important to me, that those stories were the same. And so it said to me, I'm not crazy, you know, that is what happened.
Before we wrap up, we've still got a few minutes. I really want to talk about the dress-up parties. I really want to talk about the disguises that you all began to talk about and hadn't known about each other until you sat down with Sandra and talked about it. Tell us about the dress-up parties and the disguise.
Well, when Sandra said you may well ask me this question, it meant I had to think about it, because I had not thought about it. But you're right, we've always been dressing up. But I do think the dressing up is really a metaphor for our life.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. And so and we all do it and we all enjoy it. I mean, I went modelling at 12, not my choice, my father's choice. So he sent me into another role at 12. My brother and I then joined the theatre, more play acting, more different roles. You know, so everything I've really done in my life is about trying to figure out the roles that people hold and what that behaviour means. And it's still what really interests me now, you know, why people behave the way they do and what it is that they're trying to achieve from that. So, yeah, you definitely made me think about the fact that it is very metaphorical of the roles that we played in our life, and we all still do it. And even to the point when my first granddaughter was born, the first thing I found myself doing, and I had forgotten this, was make a dress-up box for her.
And was it your daughter who said, if I ever get married, I want it to be a dress-up party?
That's my daughter. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it's a safe form of self-expression too. If you're dressed up in somebody else's, you know, costume and culture, you can fully express that. But if you're being yourself, of course, everything has to be hidden. You can hide in it.
Yeah. So, Sue-Ellen, one of the last questions I want to ask you, and I've pre-warned her about this, is about the end of the research, and when Sandra's finally written the manuscript, she gave it to you to read, and then came to you to ask you what you felt, and told you about my own experience of writing Debbie Kilroy's story, and finally coming to her and saying, well, what was it like? What's it like to have your whole life there on the page? And she looked at me and said, free. And it totally made me think about how it was for you when you got that manuscript and read it. But when Sandra asked you the question, you said something quite diabolical.
Yeah, I said I nearly vomited.
Well, that maybe did, actually, yes.
So, the deal that Sue-Ellen and I made right at the beginning, right, 2009, 10 years before Sue-Ellen read it, right? The deal was, I'll help you find out about your dad as long as you let me write this book the way I want to write it. Like, you're not allowed to kind of check up on me or make changes to it. I mean, apart from any obvious factual errors, yeah. And so that was the deal. So then 10 years later, I give it to her at the same time as I'm going to send it to a publisher and say, how do you like it? She said, oh, I threw up when I read it.
Quite weird, ladies.
Well, it was the first time I'd seen the story. So I had no idea what Sandra was doing in those 10 years. She asked me lots of questions. So it was the first time I read my life. I can't explain it any better than that.
That's okay. That's perfect.
Yeah.
But one quick question to follow up on that. When you first went to Sandra to talk about writing the story, what was in your head? What did you think the story was?
I thought it was going to be a story about my father.
So what about you?
No, God, no. No, it was supposed to be a story about Dad, but as Sandra said, we couldn't verify anything. And then when ASIO came and we found out that Mum actually had the top secret job, Dad was just an agent, but Mum had the really, really top secret job.
What was her title?
Oh, I don't think they had titles back then, you know. Yeah. And anyway, they wouldn't tell me, even if I asked, I wouldn't know.
She was behind the green door. That's all you need to know.
Yes, that's the code.
So I, you know, that was what I wanted, but I wanted it so that there was a story for my family, because I knew there was we hit brick wall after brick wall. They would have no story, and for all the reasons that Sandra explained before, I wanted them to have some sort of story.
Yeah, yes, we all have. I'm going to open it up for questions now, so I hope you've got some. I mean, this is such a quintessential, well, I think it's a quintessential Brisbane story. Have we all got spies living next door?
Some of these people do. Has anybody here a spy?
Oh, okay, great. This is, you know, the cat. We might kick it off if you're all shy. Yeah, I know lots of shy people in this audience. There's one on Zoom, so we might start with that. Can I use yours, Mike?
Okay, so this is a question from Lonnie, who says, congratulations, Sandra, on telling this incredible story, incredible, credible story, so well. I'm intrigued and saddened about the effects of what effectively was brainwashing. Oh, gee, I might not stand pointing at that, which was effectively brainwashing of children, and reminded of the families being brought up in cults, kids being brought up in cults. Did you feel the need for support or counselling for, Sue-Ellen and Joan during the unravelling of the interviews? Did you ever feel like you needed to kind of go and get some support or counselling or deprogramming?
Oh,
Sandra was the counselling.
No, I wasn't.
That was the most freeing thing that we could do. But yeah, we've had crashes. We've had crashes and burns along the way, and I've needed to talk to people and may well again. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot.
Okay, over to you guys. You mentioned your father was a survivor.
I might borrow
and
this
had
for a
one
second.
leg only.
Well, what did he survive and how did he lose his leg?
His mother, my grandmother, our grandmother, amazing lady, discovered that her husband was stealing all of the housekeeping money, was very friendly with the lady that worked at the fish and chip shop on the corner. And my father was only, very, very small, few weeks old, when she just said, no, this isn't good enough. So this is in early 30s, and left that relationship. And her mother, oh man, what a number she was. She was not a very nice lady at all, but she had no option. So my father was brought up by his grandmother, who was not a nice lady. And my grandmother had to go bush and work as a cook on a cattle station to pay her mother to look after him. So I don't know what his life was like. I can only imagine, because you don't talk about these things, but I can imagine it was not great. And when he had the accident and he lost his leg, a tram ran over his leg, the Salvation Army picked up the pieces, and so he converted to Salvation Army. I don't know this, but I actually think they saved him, both physically, emotionally, socially, in every way.
Any other questions from the audience? There's one over here. I might run the mic. Woo! Sandra, I've got a question for you. And of course, it floats obviously to Sue-Ellen too. How did you perceive risk in this storytelling?
Yeah. Well, it was a risky process to tell it. And there were a number of risks. One is knowing things. How do you know things? What's true? How can you prove it? And there was a question about what I'm legally allowed to, which I'm kind of just hoping is just all fine, But yeah, I think you're probably talking about the same thing as the last question, more about the risks to the people I was working with. And I think that's a, and to myself, yeah. Well, I certainly, I feel very close to this family after this 10 years. Sue-Ellen and I made an agreement that we would kind of keep it pretty professional while we were doing it, for obvious reasons. But in the process, we became friends, and I think pretty solid. And but it wasn't just Sue-Ellen's story. It was her brother, her sister, her mother, and they were very generous about giving their time and telling their stories. And it is definitely probably risky for people in that situation to expose themselves in that way. So yeah, there was a whole bunch of risks. Yeah.
What about the emotional risks?
One of the things that our parents did do for us was give us, superhuman might be a bit too far, but very, very highly sensitized senses. And so we trust our gut a lot, which is an accumulation of all that sensory input. And with Sandra, it was trust. It was just a level of trust that we both decided to invest in that paid off. And I say, you know, Sandra's the shadow Doherty, really, because she knows more of the story than any one of us. And she really does, because she's the one that did all the interviews.
Any other questions from the audience members here? Yep.
I'll be greedy and ask a second.
A greedy second, that's okay.
I'm wondering why ASIO past members, past heads off, interviewed your mother on 2 occasions, and was anyone from the family allowed to attend those interviews, or in fact was Sandra?
Sandra would have loved to attend those interviews. I was there, so it was my memory that was used. So I was there on both occasions. And then those 2 XDGs were at the launch. So my mother and I went to the launch of the first volume of the Spy Catchers and the second volume, which is the Protest Years. So I had occasion to speak to those 2 XDGs quite a lot. And the researcher, who has also reached out to me as a result of the book, so I'm back in contact with him, which is lovely. The most extraordinary mind. I mean, he and Sandra have got so much in common, because that ability to plot so much detailed information and find a track through it and find the connections, it is something to behold. How he did that for Australia and how Sandra did that with our story. It's just an amazing talent.
Just thank you will do for me. I've got a question, if unless there's another one waiting. What went on behind the green door? Or is that still a national secret?
No, it's not. It's they've actually published it in their history, and we've got a little bit about it in the book. But that was the very first, you know, ASIO was set up to basically to spy on, you know, to find communist spies in high places in Australian government. And so they, Joan was involved in the earliest work, which was of tapping, the very first time phones were ever tapped. And she had to listen into conversations and transcribe them. But that actually involved, is more complex than just taking notes, because she had to, people were speaking in different languages. And one of the, Joan is a person of so many surprises, like really an astonishing woman. And one of the things that she discovered was that, like, she basically learned Russian while she was doing that. She spoke several languages, but she did, there was a morning Joan and an afternoon Joan. They were both called Joan in the green room, listening in on these conversations.
So literally two
Joans, yeah, the morning Joan, the afternoon Joan. And they used to chat to each other in Russian when they, you know, passed over.
And isn't there a funny story about Joan having a couple of small babies, rocking them with one foot and having headphones on, and an apartment that she was listening in on, the one beneath or the one above?
Oh, well, this is this is called Operation Smile, and it was, again, it was one of those very early operations, and there was the so they'd started off only looking for Australians who were giving information to Soviet Union, but by this time they'd moved on to also spying on Russian diplomats or Russian people of influence, you know, in Sydney. And Fedor Nosov was the TAS agent at the time, and he lived in Darlinghurst, or in a building called Candy, which in Sydney, if people, some of you are Sydney people, probably know this place. It's kind of famous in Sydney law, but he lived there, and the Dohertys lived on the floor above. And you'll remember Ray Whitrod. Ray Whitrod, this was before he was a policeman, he was an ASIO spy, and he was responsible for cutting a hole in the floor between the 2 apartments and putting in the listening device. He stuffed it up, and A, you could look up and see it, and B, there was sawdust all over the floor down below. So he had to, luckily Nosov was out at the time, so he had to rush off to the landlord and say, let me in, you know, and come up with a story so he could clean up and hide the evidence of this. But
He spent a lot of time cleaning up.
Didn't he ever? And Ray Whitrod, just say something
Oh, at my father's funeral, oh my God, there were so many people there. I had no idea who the heck they were. But at the entrance, there was this massive horseshoe of flowers. And I thought, who the heck would send this? And there was a ribbon across it, you know, from Ray Woodsrod and the Queensland Police. And I'm like, no idea. Like, what is that? It took me, you know, what, 40 years to find out why.
We've got one more question from Zoom, and the question is, Sandra, when and how did you decide to tell Sue-Ellen that the book wasn't going to be solely about her father and that it's going to be about her and her family?
I did tell her that before we got to the I actually gave it to her. Yeah, because I went this book. It took me 3 years to write, and that was many drafts. I drafted it different ways, and I did try. And first 2 drafts were trying to make it about the family. Then I did a whole thing of trying to be like Helen Garner and write it from my viewpoint, which I think you have to be Helen Garner to do that. It was kind of pretty embarrassing draft, that one. And then I just, through reading about writing, and I mean, I was teaching myself to write while I was doing this, and I was talking to writer friends and so on. They said, you know what, really a book doesn't work that well. I wanted this to be a readable book, and a really interesting book, as readable as a novel. And people say, well, if you're going to do that, it's got to be about one person. And although, and it had to be, and Sue-Ellen, this is Sue-Ellen's quest. That's why she's here beside me tonight. I wrote the book, and it's my words and my interpretation of it. But, she was the one who, made it happen, hunted me down, and lured me into it, and stuck by me, and it's still, we're still working on it together at this stage. So yeah, before I actually showed it to her, she did know that, and so did Amanda and Mark and
everyone else.
and Joan. Yeah.
We've got to finish up pretty quickly, but both Sue-Ellen and Sandra had a couple of thanks that they wanted to extend to a couple of people, I think.
So I wanted to thank my family, who have been just so jolly through this whole thing, and they've been really super, including my poor old husband, who has said nothing, just sat by quietly, picked the pieces up every now and then, kicked me up the backside every now and then. He's been a dream. But mostly I want to thank Sandra, because as you can imagine, trust is a really difficult thing for all of us, but it's super difficult for an ASIO kid. And she just has never put a foot wrong. So thank you, Sandra.
So, and similarly, I really want to, my main thank you is to the Doherty family, to all of them, to Joan and to Mark and to Amanda and to Sue-Ellen, and for the trust that they gave me, and for the time that they gave me, and for the patience that they had with me. All that 10 years, Sue-Ellen never once asked, where are you up to? She really did it, she just let me do it in my own muddling way through way. And and I got the greatest respect and admiration and affection for each member of this family. And now I had so much help from so many people, but because it took so long, you do not want to sit here all night while I name everyone. So read the acknowledgements. I've tried to do it in the acknowledgements, all the people who've helped, or a lot of them, but just all the people, my friends and, colleagues and family who just listened, even, it's kind of can be a lonely business, and I didn't mention in the acknowledgements one member of Allen and Unwin staff who was just, we both love, Laura Benson, who's the publicist, and you've seen all the publicity, she's amazing. So we just total respect for that woman. And I do also want to thank my family, my mother Rosa, who the book is dedicated to, and my sister Annette, who is here, And in Canberra, I don't know, I think there may be some Canberra families there, but there's Hada and Lynette and beautiful Bella in Canberra. And in Melbourne is Dan and Maria, and I think Dan is on Zoom tonight. And right here, Carrick and Susie, and Susie, is Fergus there? Are you holding Fergus? And he hasn't cried at all. And Patrick and Archie are at home, but and also Danny Troy. I know you don't want me to mention you, but he's, you know, we've been married 40 years. He's been there, and really, you know, all these people who in my family who have just accepted that, you know, all that apparently fruitless scribbling and staring at the ceiling that I do, you know, like is what I do, you know, and kind of been really so supportive of me. So yeah, thank you.
Right.
I won't name you all the things you've done, but I will buy you a beer. So if you all want to come to the Boundary Hotel now, there's some drinks at the bar. So, and the Hardgrave room at the Boundary Hotel, it's that way. Yeah.
And before we all do that, there is a signing time. So we've run out of time out here, but there's more time to chat at the signing table. I'd like to thank Chris Olsson for this amazing job. What a amazing job. That's fantastic. And what we're going to do to make this next bit as easy as possible is we're going to get Sandra and Sue-Ellen out first. We're going to get you to the signing table. And as we do that, and as you're waiting to get to the signing table, the bar is open for a little while, so it's open for one more drink. So feel free to have last drinks here while you're waiting for a signing. We'll get the ladies out now. Thank you everyone on Zoom, and goodbye to you.
Bye.